Hello YouTube, today I have chosen violence. We're talking about Vayne. There's a lot of noise going around about the cycle of events, cloud of darkness, all that good stuff. Extreme violence being chosen today. I want to say out the gate, I am not saying that Vayne is bad. In fact, I actually think he's pretty good, but I do think he's the worst BT Plus release so far. Now, if you want to go ahead and skip and take me out of context or respond, I'm going to be responding with clown emojis, and if you are rude about this and not responding, well, only if you're rude, I'm going to pin you and make you look stupid. If you disagree with me, do so calmly and explain why, and we can talk about it in the comments. But I am taking a stance, and y'all know I have no problem doing that. I haven't stirred the pot in a while, so this should be entertaining. If you're really curious why I'm harsh on Vayne, before you do that, actually, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to my channel. This is my poll plans, by the way, where I go over units. From my perspective, I haven't played this period in the Japanese version. So yeah, go ahead and like, subscribe, share, drop a comment about your plans for this event. I do play both JP and Global, upload content about both, and I stream once a week on the Ranting Hour, where I probably go more even in depth on this take. This should be a fun time. I do read all the comments, so if you're afraid to, don't be afraid to drop anything. This is kind of where my monthly JP retrospectives fell off-ish, because I kind of didn't feel like doing them. But you can see my one about Vayne, and everything here is my impression and my opinion. I do screw up stuff, so feel free to disagree and do so respectfully, and actually disagree with what I've said. So if you're curious about why I'm so harsh on Vayne, you can go ahead and skip to my Vayne breakdown in the timestamp, so you can hear a little bit more. But I encourage you, don't make yourself look like a fool. Hear everything I have to say before you disagree with something that I didn't say, all right? Oh boy, there is a lot to say about this, this whole event, man. Anyways, let's talk about Vayne's kit first. Vayne is getting the works with rework, LD, BT plus 80, all of it. Let's talk about it real quick. His skill 1 now does 80% splash, and his skill 2 now does more brave hits and has refund in between, so it's a lot more damage on both skills. His brave and HP got upgraded, but nobody's touching those. But the big thing now is that when Vayne is at 3 stacks and he's at full, he actually doesn't consume skill uses, so now he is a full skill spammer. This is an enormous damage increase for him, especially because his EX will be back more often as well. His LD is an instant turn rate move that gets him to a full 3 stacks, and it gets him a new buff. This is all a single target triple HP attack, by the way. It gives Vayne the usual offensive stat ups and HP damage up, brave regen up, brave damage up, but it also gives the party some stats up as well. His LD boards give him brave damage, selfish brave damage up based on his stacks. The gist is, while his LD buff is up, he's not completely selfish, which is a nice touch. He is truly a man of the people. His BT effect is decent. He gives the party brave regen, party attack up, party brave damage up, and party brave damage cap up. Additionally, when either he or someone else breaks an enemy, Vayne does a follow-up. It's a single target double HP attack that does AoE brave hits. His calls are not worth talking about, and his high armor is actually Unity, not DPS or attack armor, and he has a selfish brave cap split for when you blue him. This makes sense because he scales well with bigger brave hits. Now for my Vayne breakdown. Now, if you skipped here from when I told you earlier, congrats, you've been baited. I'm about to say a bunch of good things about Vayne, and then I'm going to talk about why I'm not too big on him. But you get to hear out why I think he's great, so you can maybe suffer some cognitive dissonance if you expected to come in here disagreeing with me. Vayne's strengths, as before in his previous tuning passes, are all about his free consecutive turns. It is super easy to abuse auras with him. Just stack a bunch of effects and let him go nuts, and you can do a lot of damage in a short period of time. Vayne does not have low damage, but it's the same thing as usual. People don't know how to add. You know, core enables people by doing a lot of damage over time, when actually core himself is just doing a lot of damage. It's just, what's the difference between doing a 50k over 2 consecutive turns, one of which is free, and doing 100k at once? The people's IQ and not being able to understand math. If you set Vayne up correctly, I think of him similar to Emperor in the fact that he's got a very low floor if you don't build around him correctly, but if you do build around him and amp his damage and have a bunch of follow-ups and effects going, he's got a very high output, so it's really setup based. There is a way to build Vayne stacks in his BT phase. I don't quite understand it, but I know it's possible to get him a bunch of consecutive turns in a row during his BT phase, so he can just spam Force of Will non-stop after he comes out of BT phase, provided that the boss allows him to go nuts like that. So say you got a Cloud of Darkness friend in the background, you got a secondary BT effect like Bartz or something, so Vayne will be doing all this consecutive damage and the bosses won't be getting turns, and then his follow-up will add up as well, single target. And because Vayne has those party buffs, the follow-ups and the other effects are getting buffed as well. So it's a specific playstyle, but Vayne is very good at it when you do that. Alternatively, Vayne can just sit there and then rely on someone who breaks on their own, like Cloud of Darkness, Tidus, maybe Aranea, although these are kind of theorycraft teams, but I know Cloud of Darkness and Vayne are a popular pair, and it's good that they come together. Vayne can just rely on them doing the breaks and just sit there as an aura bot potentially. So there's different ways to play him, and he can be very effective. I have seen people run Vayne into the ground with proper teams, and it actually is pretty disgusting how fast he can rush bosses down. His abilities and kit scale very well. His weaknesses, now this is where I'm going to get spicy, are that low floor that I mentioned earlier, where again, like Emperor, if you build around Emperor, he's a nuke. If you don't build around Emperor, he's just going to be like ass damage. And Vayne is even more so, because I don't like emphasizing that he needs green to be good, because that applies to what Bartz and Ishtola as well, because you're not running them without green. Zidane and Ace did do decently without green though. However, setup cost is a real thing, and while it is possible to blow entirely through stuff with Vayne, that requires other setup, proper friends, proper calls, proper etc. And I think there's a lot of setup cost that may not be worth it to everyone. Again, I know people have run Vayne into the ground, so I can't say this enough. I don't think Vayne is bad. I think he's good overall. But if you're putting him up against Zidane, Bartz, Ace, Cod, whoever else got a BT, why am I blanking here? Vayne, the amount of setup cost is why I think he's probably the worst BT plus to date. Now, don't conflate worst with bad. If there is a race of Olympic runners and there's 5 of them, and the person who comes in last is the worst, are they a bad runner? No, they're actually a great runner compared to everything else, but they are the worst. So if you're not smart enough to understand relativity versus like an objective point, then just get off my channel. So if you're gonna run a Vayne saga or something to try and prove all the haters right and whatever it is, I don't care, because again, I've seen Vayne run into the ground. I've acknowledged how powerful he can be with the right setup. I just think that setup cost is a little bit too big, and I think while he's competitive, I think the setup cost is really what drags him down. Bartz builds up his stacks and he's good. Ace is just more damage. Zidane is fine without BT. He's relying on, it's either his deletes clap things or they don't. Shtolo needs everyone to be at Eye Brave, but that's just battery them. Darkness follows up unconditionally. Twins are based on enemies. You're not bringing them to a single target anyways. And Garland is based on if the enemy gets turned. So he either really works well or he doesn't. And y'all know I hate two-dimensional comparisons, and this is not one, because setup cost is a very real thing, especially with BT Plus and how one of those choices you're locked in forever. So I would feel bad if someone greened Vayne and didn't have the full picture on understanding quite properly how to set them up. That being said, if you do know what you're doing and you understand the kit fine, you're gonna get insane mileage out of him. You run Vayne with a triple BT team of Bartz and Cloud of Darkness alongside him, so you can abuse his follow-ups to prove that he's good. When I just said he requires a lot of setup, then I'm gonna slap you. Vayne is good, but I think he's at the bottom of the currently released BT Plus so far until Arden. And if you disagree with me, I'd like to hear your reasons. As for fights Vayne is good in, he's good in his cycle. I think the whole Vayne is bad in his fights has been largely overblown just because he's not a free win, but he hits all the orbs in his cycle. People who can't use Vayne in his cycle are probably just bad players. For his fight, break him out of order. For Shulk's event, set up a paralyze while he's going, and then you can break them and maintain the orb. And for Shulk's fight, he literally is good there because the orb is to recover both skills, and he does that on his EX. Outside of synergy, he doesn't particularly shine in any orbs. Maybe this recent orb with King, where you have to reload 2 skills again, just like Shulk's orb. He is a flexible damage dealer that can work in any situations where you can just blow past bosses and not have to deal with mechanics potentially. Just please, for the love of God, and I'll say this again later in the video, if you're not playing the green Vayne, don't even touch his LD, bro. It's not worth it. If you're trying to do chaos challenges, just use his EX plus. It ain't worth it. LD Vayne is pretty underwhelming damage, honestly. You got to go all in on this dude or not at all. LD Vayne with base high armor is one of my biggest regrets in JP. Now let's talk about Cod's kit. Cod got a rework to skill 1, it's double HP attack now, and the LD boards now give more HP damage up based on darkness stacks. Now it's just a flat 20% HP damage up just from the overhead, and it's 10% more at 5 or more stacks. And now if you green Cod, you get party HP damage up by 20% and some overflow for the party as well. This means at 5 or more stacks, Cod has a 50% HP damage up going with more overflow as well. So the follow-up is massively buffed. This is a huge damage output increase for Cod. So with BT Plus, you can, and also the length of the BT effect is extended by 3 turns, I believe. So that's 8 turns follow-ups, which is very abusable in the right setups. Cod's strengths are just big damage. Cod does a lot more damage now, and you can abuse this, especially now you don't need to use the BT phase to get the effect in the party. So now Cod is a better BT plus friend and better in the party as well. You can double up on with the burst phase and have it active, so you can be following up mid burst phase. There's a lot of strategies, and Cod's damage is definitely worth it now. This very silly damage increase allows more output, obviously, and skipping damage phases potentially. Unconditional follow-up means you can kind of just go nuts, and having Cod in the party is definitely a benefit, especially with that HP damage up as well. As for weaknesses, it's kind of hard to mess her up at this point, really. It's definitely green or bust. If you don't know how to put your foot on the pedal or just abuse the follow-up and the off turns, then it's not really going to be a good thing for you. Not off turns, but on other player turns. If you're playing Cod, you're probably bum rushing. And per usual, the normal, if the bosses need to take turns and you send them to the Shadow Realm too far, you can get punished, but that's avoidable. As for fights, if you're still struggling with Quistis' fight, you can go back with BT plus Cod potentially, or just rework Cod at base BT, or maybe even LD, and go sort it out, because now they're more powerful. Nothing else really stands out, and that's fine, because Cod is just a damage dealer, which means they fit in anywhere, and as long as you enable them, you're going to get good results. And there's not much setup cost for Cod, unlike Vayne. Outside of the obvious needing green, you don't need to break, the follow-up happens, and you get the unconditional HP damage up. Bosses don't need turns, and they're going to the Shadow Realm. And not only are they going to the Shadow Realm, they're going to die pretty quickly too. Now let's talk about the actual Vayne event, and there's a lot of head-assery going on about this too. I can definitely say this fight was probably overhyped. There's ways around it. It's got high defense, and the boss punishes you if you take too many turns. If you take 12 in a row, they warp in front of you, cleanse silver debuffs as well, and you just get slapped. High defense and high brave damage and brave game reductions, and people used to know turning things were not met with happiness on this fight. And there's a misconception that Vayne is bad on this fight, and really you just break them out of order. Let them get turns, don't go crazy, and that's all you really need to do, but that's a lot. It's a difficult concept for some people to understand. I will say that Vayne might not be the best option, and I found an easier solution because I didn't have BT Vayne. An easier solution I had for this fight was just to go full off turn. But it's the Jack bosses, and then they have the thing where they put the Stardust on them or whatever it is, and then you need to take 3 turns to disable it, or else they're going to cleanse and hit you harder. So it's a turn manipulation fight, and some people struggle with that. But if you kind of know it, so the off-turn damage enjoyers are going to eat her. This fight in particular is one of the reasons I've been hyping up Beatrix and Ace, because what you can do is you can just take a couple turns and let the Stardust fall off, and let them hit you, and then Beatrix will counter and ignore defense and cut through them, because they do have high defense. So like Ferris calls, Tidus calls, etc., to drop their defense will be very valuable here. Porum, Ace both have defense down in their kits. You defense ignore with Zac or Sabin or Stroggle, for example. You sync actually with her massive defense down, and she'll delay herself so they can act. So it's actually not a bad idea to bring sync here necessarily. If you're gonna range mount, just know how to hit the brakes occasionally. It's unfortunate that they didn't add a counter over their heads to signify 12 turns you're gonna get blown up, but just plan to let them act. Again, off-turn enjoyers, people who know how to play defensively, and then go back and forth with the bosses. This shouldn't be that bad for you. And I had trouble with the fight initially. I was trying to bring Bartz, BT, Vayne LD, and Zac, and there just wasn't enough buffs on this team, and I wasn't dropping debuffs enough, and I wasn't doing any damage. I was getting frustrated. But then when I went back and I used Beatrix and I hit him in the off turn, so that it was +4 on the break, ended up being pretty straightforward. Vayne is not bad here. Just break them out of order, bro, and pump, and just don't go crazy. That's really all you gotta do. Same with Cloud of Darkness. Delay the opposite one so they don't go as far back, or just hold on to the darkness stacks in general. This is just the result of Blade and Hyperbole. But otherwise, good units, like I mentioned, Ace, Beatrix for off-turn shenanigans, Zac ignoring their defense, and Rush Assault will cut through all their stuff. Bartz because he's good in general, Reigns because he's good in general. Those are really the main ones. There's Tola to cut their, like, normal, just good stuff, really. Just break them out of order, bro. In JP, I ended up running Beatrix, Bartz, and Zac, and I let Beatrix and Zac eat off of Bartz's BT auras and ignore defense and cut to them, and Beatrix cutting through in the off turns. This time around in Global, I'm going to be running Beatrix, Ace, and I'm going to be throwing Barret on the team, one for the attack up. Beatrix and Ace will be providing defense down, and I'll accomplish that via my call as well. I'm just going to break them in the off turns and keep flooding them with big damage. Triple blue armor teams will cut through this definitely. Just watch out for the turn count too, because I think it's a little low at like 50 or 55, I want to say. So make sure you want to be slamming the pedal, but also letting them take turns in between. Also, a quick note about Iroha's RF, which you can RF through, you can farm in the co-op. It's actually not that good. I mean, it does scale with Brave Game like Paladin Cecil's does, but in practice it will be worth it because it's selfish. So it'll be in practice only worthy of like maybe an extra Brave hit, but it's not going to be very impactful that you're going to notice it that much. So while it might be best in slot for encouragement people with Ace slots, it's not that good. So temper your expectations. So my plans, I am skipping both banners. I have Cloud of Darkness as BT, and I'm not going to invest in COD. I honestly don't really like the playstyle, to be honest, but COD has insane results. across the board. Like if you're like a huge like damage racer and you love blowing people up very quickly, fast speed runs, whatever, Cod's your person. If you pulled Cloud of Darkness to green them way back because you were hyped about them and you were told to do stuff, and now you're sitting there like, wait, I want to green someone else. Congrats, you fell for the bait. Evaluate your sources next time, because I tried to tell y'all, tried to say, know if you're gonna green Cod, because if you're gonna be hyper BT plus, you ain't got the resources, you're gonna be looking like a fool. So sorry. If you do decide to go into Cod, first off, put him up as your friend unit because I need him. Second off, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of the unit. I don't think going for Cod at this point is necessarily great, although if you are newer and you need to farm your summon boards, Cod LD is the best choice for auto plussing through the ultimate boards, and I think it's Alexander that's going to be synergy right now as well. Cod LD only, but trash, garbage, don't do it. As for Vayne, similar, I'm not going to green him. His LD only Vayne is poop. Skipping this banner as well, I don't need anything on it. It would have been nice to have Iroha, but I'm not gonna get Vayne. I just don't want his BT. I won't green him, and I think not even for challenge quests, I won't even need his LD. If you're not going if you don't plan to go all the way blue armor, green BT, then just don't touch this banner. Honestly, it's really not worth it. Like I said before, LD only Vayne with base high armor, which ended up being Unity because I didn't read and double check it. It's one of my biggest regrets in JP, just because he was never that useful for me. And that's all I really got to say. If you disagree with my takes or anything, be respectful in the comments, and I'll engage with you respectfully as well. If you're rude or if you misrepresent my points, I'm going to correct you first, and if you double down and are rude, then I might get annoyed. But I'm curious to see what people's other takes on this are. I think Vayne is good, but I also think he's the worst BT plus so far. Those two statements are not mutually exclusive, and I am not afraid to take a stance ever. I'll even go a step further and say I thought Zidane was the worst BT plus last month. That also doesn't mean he's bad. Zidane was actually my most used green in JP. I love Zidane. I think he's great, but I also think he was the worst last month comparatively. And again, if you have a disagree with the points I'm making, not the points you think I'm making. All right. So be sure to like the video, subscribe, comment. This is probably gonna get spicy in the comment section. Maybe I can bait out some idiot of the weeks for a ranting hour. We'll see how that goes. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.